How's it going, everybody? I'm Steve, and welcome back. So it's been a while since I've done a video on my channel because I have a movie channel as well called Excelsior Movie Reviews. That takes up a lot of my time, but I actually have an extra day off this week, and I've actually been thinking about doing this for quite a while. If you know my channel, I've done like a top 10 list for my favorite guitar players and drummers and bass players, but I've never done one for my favorite like hard rock and metal, a vocalist. And I've thought about this for a long time. Just who would I put in my top 10 if I had out there? A lot of the bands I love are like the ones I listened to when I was a kid. A lot of British bands, just because when I was a kid, I was listening to a lot of metal, and I kind of expanded my listening later on in life. But the ones that I've loved since I was a kid are the ones I come back to all the time. All right, so kicking off here at number 10, I have Ian Gillan from Deep Purple. Obviously, a great iconic singer. Obviously, Machine Head's one of the great hard rock albums of all time. In Rock's a really great one. Some great stuff. And obviously Ian Gillan went on to do his own solo band. And, he was also in Black Sabbath very, very briefly, and that may have been when he actually messed his voice up at that point, which is kind of sad. But back in the '70s, he was a great singer, though. Okay, so at number 9, I've got Glenn Danzig. I've grown up with Glenn Danzig. Obviously, he was in the Misfits. He was in Sam Hain, and then he went on to do like a solo career. Obviously, the first 4 Misfits albums are some of my favorite music. I love that original lineup with John Christ and Chuck Biscuits and Eerie Von. It's fantastic. And I consider Glenn Danzig to be kind of like the evil Elvis. He's got that great voice. Just like I said, the first 4 Danzig albums are the ones I would focus on. At least if you've never listened to his solo stuff, that's where I would start. Obviously with Mother, the kind of the signature song we had from that band, and so I've always loved his voice. Okay, so at number 8, I've got Roger Daltry, obviously the iconic singer from the band The Who. They were kind of like proto metal, sort of. Back in the '60s, they were doing stuff that was a little bit lighter, than more like a '60s pop music. And then late '60s, early '70s, and throughout the '70s, they were just a great band. Pete Townshend's one of the great guitar players out there, so I had to include Roger Daltrey just because I love the Who. Okay, so at number 7, obviously I love like the '90s. I'm 51 years old, so I kind of grew up with that music. But I'm a huge fan of Maynard James Keenan from Tool. Great singer. Obviously he was in A Perfect Circle and Pussifer and just all those bands, and I've always loved his voice. They're sort of like alternative metal, sort of like a prog metal, and a lot of people would consider them to be. But I think he's got a great voice. Even now, his voice isn't quite what it used to be. I think when Tool plays live, he doesn't do like the early Tool stuff anymore because from what I understand, he really can't hit those notes anymore. But I think it's still the 4 albums that they've done after the debut, I think he still does that stuff live, and he still has quite a great voice, considering he's like late 50s now. Okay, so at number 6, I have Bruce Dickinson, obviously the lead singer of the band Iron Maiden. Like I said, this is all a hard rock and metal list, so it's going to have metal singers, and I think he's one of the greatest vocalists out there. Love his lyrics. I love Iron Maiden. Obviously, the '80s Maiden's my favorite period from them. But obviously he wasn't the original singer. But once he took over, Iron Maiden took off as a huge band. Even though I like the first 2 Iron Maiden albums as well. But when he took over on the 3rd album, that's when that band really skyrocketed, became icons, and that classic metal band. Okay, so number 5, obviously I couldn't leave this singer off my list. If we're talking about hard rock and metal, I've got Ozzy, obviously the lead singer of Black Sabbath. Iconic singer from that band, and then he went on to a solo career and I think he did even better that period of time as far as album sales, popularity. He was almost kind of like Left 4 Dead, and he's got that voice that has bailed him out for several decades. I don't think he's quite as great as he used to be. Now he's in his 70s. But back in the '70s and '80s, that was his prime period, and Ozzy's as an iconic singer. Okay, so at number 4, I'm going to go back to the '90s. Like I said, I grew up in that period. But I've got Chris Cornell, obviously from the band Soundgarden, iconic. He's in Audio Slave. He had a solo career too, and I think that voice has carried him through those years. Now, sadly, he's passed away now, but But even like Audio Slave, I thought he was really great in that time period. But Soundgarden's definitely more of a like a hard rock metal band. You know, from Seattle. They were like one of them and Alice in Chains were like the kind of like the metal bands in Seattle at that time. And you know, even after that though, Audio Slave I think is really great. You know, like I said, I grew up in that time period, so the 90s are kind of special to me. And you know, I just couldn't leave Chris Cornell off my list, even though I think his voice kind of was kind of damaged, and he couldn't really hit those Soundgarden notes later on in his career. And okay, so number 3, I have Rob Halford from Judas Priest. Couldn't leave Rob Halford out there. He's got those pipes where you can hit those really high notes. You know, I just couldn't leave him off my list. I'm a huge Judas Priest fan as well. So obviously, this, like I said, this is a hard rock and metal list, and he's got to be on my list if you're talking about the bands from that era, especially from like the 70s and 80s. That's when Judas Priest were really great. Even in the 90s, really great, and they're still going pretty strong these days too. So he's like in his 70s now. I don't think anybody's ever kept their voice as strong as he has over the years. Just to be able to do that still in his early 70s is commendable. And he's a rock legend, metal legend, the metal god. Okay, so number 2, I've got another iconic singer that's sadly passed away as well, but I've got Ronnie James Dio. Obviously, he was in Rainbow, he was in Black Sabbath. He's his solo career as well. Like all 3 of those bands his voice carried him through those bands as well. And it just, if you're talking about metal, he's like the band, the metal singer that everyone thinks of. I think even now, even younger people probably think of Dio as being that iconic metal singer. And I had to put him at number 2. All right, so I had to bring up some honorable mentions. Obviously, I said there was one singer that I wasn't sure if I could put him on a hard rock or metal list, but it's Freddie Mercury from Queen. Obviously, Queen, I think the first 3 albums from them I think you can classify those as being metal albums. Queen, Queen 2, and Sheer Heart Attack. I think those are really heavy albums. And then the band kind of became more of a pop band or classic rock band at that point. I wouldn't call them extremely heavy after that, but I listed Brian May on my top 10 favorite guitar players, and I think if he had his way, the band would have been much heavier. He just kind of played for the song, and it didn't really go too crazy with it. But I think those first 3 albums are where Queen was maybe it could be considered to be hard rock or metal. Obviously, I also have Jay Buchanan from Rival Sons. Just talking about like bands from this century. Rival Sons are really great. I've got Tobias Forge from Ghost. I think he's a great singer. Paul Stanley from Kiss. One of the great ones, Ann Wilson from Heart. I think Heart could be sort of considered to be hard rock, I think. Steve Perry from Journey. Don't know if they're necessarily considered to be hard rock or not, but some great ones there. But I just want to give some shout outs to some of those singers. Paul Rodgers from Free and Bad Company. I don't know if they're technically considered to be hard rock or metal either, but I think these are all great singers, and I just had to kind of mention them. All right, so at number 1, I've got Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. Obviously, the mighty Led Zeppelin. I couldn't leave them off this list here. I have they're considered to be like top 10 favorite bands of all time, so I couldn't leave their lead singer off there. He's just an iconic singer that they're sort of like proto metal in some ways too. Just what they did in the late 60s and early, throughout the 70s. Just saying, after that, I wouldn't necessarily call the stuff that he's done as a solo artist to be hard rock or metal, but I would consider Led Zeppelin to be definitely a hard rock band. Did some different stuff over their career, but I consider it to be hard rock and metal. I think he's classified in that era, proto metal. Okay, everybody, I really appreciate you watching this video. Please leave in the comments. Let me know some singers that I left off my list. Obviously, like Brian Johnson from AC/DC could be mentioned. I don't know if he necessarily has the greatest pure voice like some of the people I have on my list, but he's got that iconic voice for sure. So I can understand people kind of mentioning him in the comments. Please, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing that. Please put a thumbs up on this video. It really helps my channel grow. And everybody have a great one. Thank you.